to the Go Show. Oh, we got a little technical error right away. We're going to start off a little bit different. And welcome back. Wow, a little technical error there to start off in the first 10 seconds. It was really just me freestyling, a new Goat Show intro. So you missed nothing. You missed absolutely nothing there. This is the Overpower Mountain podcast, and I am your host, Marcel, the greatest Overpower player ever. What a show last week we had. Quite an interesting show. I had a lot of fun with the two boys from LRG. I hope you all enjoyed it at home as well. And I'm glad to have you here again this evening. We're going to have quite an interesting show as well. How fast is everything going in Overpower? It seems like a mile a minute, except no cards. I'm boundfully excited as much as everybody like you at home. Left, right, and center, we're getting all this information, and it's hard to disseminate it all so quickly because it's coming in so many different unique ways. Through releases and the home base and different things that are occurring, but I'm here to try to decipher it all for you as well. There's been some really good news, some really great news, and some, well, let's just get this started episode with the news. Overpower. Overpower news. Yeah, I added a little bit there because there's a little bit extra news that has been happening right now in the Overpower scene. So first thing we got out going right now is the player portal, as I just aforementioned, dropped this last week. And I gotta say it's coming out to mixed reviews. As I mentioned to a lot of you at home, I was basically using it pretty much primarily as like a card finder. I was not using any of the deck builder side function of it at all in the grand scheme, as we jokingly talked about in the last episode. So I would say, there's some bugs that are occurring. People are not being able to save decks. People are not being able to share decks. I think this is one of the functions that a lot of people, from what I'm gathering on the boards, were really excited to do. So I hope that sort of gets fixed over the next little while. Uh, it is still functioning nicely as a card finder in my mind. I'm using it thoroughly with the filter service on the side to, create my modern thoughts as well. But the deck builder, it needs a little bit of work. Let's just say there's more bugs than a bad motel in there, somewhere. But good all around, like I said, for the card finder. So a thumbs up. Let's keep it going. Positive thoughts. And with that in mind, April 7th. That's right, friends. April 7th. Mark it on your calendar. A date has been confirmed by Joe CEO himself. Cards will be mailed out April 7th. Okay. Now, I don't know if he's just saying like they'll be at the distributors, but from what I'm told, it's going to take no more than 2 days at the distributors to sort of push it out towards us. April 7th, that's a Monday. You should be getting things by the end of the week. This is what I'll say though. Sadly, it kind of sucks for Canadians, and I'm sure you all understand why. Not only will our stuff be tariffed, but it will be a week pretty much after the initial shipment because, we're so far north. I can only imagine maybe might get it by the Friday in the grand scheme. Hilarious. Maybe by, the Monday, because obviously things don't ship on the weekend. So it'll be interesting. Maybe if they did FedEx, it might come in a different sort of fashion, but I imagine it's coming through the postal service. So it sucks a little for Canadians, but I apologize ahead of time for all the bad, pack breaking episodes you're all going to have to watch until I get my hands on some packs and can do it properly for you and give you the proper OP, card break. With that, we have the Peace Bridge Memorial NAOL Tournament, June 20th and 21st, Niagara Falls, Canada. This is run by Howard Bertrand, so if you have any sort of questions in regards to the tournament, you can reach out to him. He's on a plethora of all the boards. This will be the first chance you will get an opportunity to play me in the new Legacy environment. Also, a chance to play me in the Modern environment, depending on what the other tournament is on the Friday. So it's going to be really exciting. Get starting to make your plans. We have a rulebook update as well, my friends. It is out. You heard me right. The rulebook, the comprehensive rulebook, has hit the airwaves. I personally am reading over through it. I'm going through it very fine-toothly with a nice comb that I bought just for this specific occasion. And I have to say, it's an interesting read so far. I think, the way it's formatted is done well. I'm going to reserve all my full thoughts until we get to our rule episode. That'll be very short coming within the next few, because I want to make sure everybody's on board and understands what's going on with the future of both Legacy as well as Modern. So, as we continue with that, obviously, keep an eye out for that exciting episode about the rules. I promise I'll try to do my best to make it as super impressive and exciting as possible. Possibly might even bring on the rules man himself, Dave McMillan. We'll see what we can do about that. The second home base. Oh, sorry. Before we get into that, OPedia news will actually be at the end of this episode. It will be talked about and discussed. The OPedia. This happened in recently on, I believe it was the NAOL Facebook page, and some random Robin Hood character was spouting some stuff off. I reached out to said person, and through some really unique, weird reverse dialogue that I had to break out my old English dictionary for, I have to say I was able to sort of get on to what they were trying to accomplish, and I have to say, wow, it's quite amazing, and we're going to discuss that at the end of this episode a little bit more. Second home base has been released by LRG. Now, I don't know about you, but when I actually wrote that out, I was like, that sounds a bit weird to me. They named their, I guess, monthly digest the home base, and I get it. Like, it's a great name, but when I just said, like, the second home base released by LRG, it kind of got me a little bit when I was thinking about it. I was just like, oh no, it's not an actual like home base card being released. Please don't think that. It's actually was their, you know, I guess digest that they released to all the public monthly. Really great, a couple really great articles. One about how the company's looking at broken cards and what their process is moving through them. Another one in regards to the combat characters that are coming through. Great read all around, I have to say personally. The one thing I was really looking forward to as well, though, was, I guess you would say, the regional news. And what kind of happened there was we got half news. It's kind of hard for people like me who, have a day job as well, to book on, half sort of news. It's really tough. I like to plan things really far in advance. And with the first one already coming around July, but with no actual, where it's going to be is a little bit tough. So Uh, let's just say LRG, what's going on there? Let's get that figured out. And that's the news. Overpower, overpower, overpower news. As I always say, you don't come here for the news, you come here for the knowledge. And with the deck builder out, people are starting to form ideas and discuss the modern meta that's happening right now. And it's exciting times. Even I'm falling asleep, dreaming of new combos, new ideas, new concepts. And then I keep coming back to this one thought that happens, and it's reoccurring as I'm building these modern decks out. And the thought I keep coming back to, it's a very basic one that seemed to almost answer itself in the old legacy game. And I'll explain why in a second, but in the new modern game, it's not as easy an answer. And that question is, who's my reserve character going to be? In the old Legacy game, you could easily answer this question very quickly in regards to, okay, I have a strength deck, I'm going old Spider Woman. I have an intellect deck or a fighting deck, I'm going to go Sable. I'm going to go, or you could even switch it up and go to these more other thoughts where, like, you could pair more stat wise, like Thing, just backing up that big strength 8 back in the old day with that big 10 coming up as well. I think the reserve in modern needs to be more intricate in a competitive deck, especially with the selections we have at the moment. So, who do we have? Well, we have Cthulhu, we have Dr. Watson, we have Mina Harker, Carson of Venus, Morgan Le Fay, Jane Porter, Victory Harbin. Now, these are your reserve options that have playable reserve cards. So, again, I'm not referencing if you were just trying to pair them up with a stat line. A la I just mentioned the thing thought. These are the ones that have actual playable cards from reserve. Now, I often found myself building these amazing front lines, but then coming to the idea that, well, I have this many points left in reserve, and so I just have to pick one of these characters left. And then I started really deep thinking it and thinking, well, I want to be uber competitive moving forward. And, it probably doesn't overly benefit me to, share all of my thoughts with you, but I'm here to make you all better and get you to the top of the mountain just like me. So these were my initial thoughts when it came to sort of deck building right away as I was perusing everything. I got greedy with my front line. I wanted everything. So, all my characters were these super high point characters. Next thing I know, I have 16 points in reserve, and I'm like, okay, well, there's two 16-point characters, and neither of them are in the grid that I really want. But can they work? And of course they can work. And a lot of the reserve characters have this weird dynamic in the modern, at least in the ERB set currently, of this 221 Baker Street approach or benefit to having that as your home base. Somebody out there truly loves 221 Baker Street and says like, "Oh no, this is gonna work. We're gonna make this work, at least in the modern environment." And I think they're right. I think Baker Street thoughts will eventually creep up really, really, really hard as the meta starts to form. I think Yes, of course, John, you are correct in saying that. Billy the Kid's inherent, works well as in reserve as well, where he can throw any specials that are numerical valued from reserve. So there is benefit to that. I do agree. I didn't list him specifically, because none of his cards actually say maybe played from reserve, but you're very much correct about the inherent ability. And, thank you for bringing that up. So obviously, there is the Billy the Kid aspect, though, throwing only a few specials with low numeric value. I guess that would be more value in my mind than per se Jane Porter that's, on the list that I'm discussing. So this is what I'll have to say. First up, we got the big boy coming in at a threat level of 22 points. Cthulhu, the big monster himself. Great stat backup. Throwing monster team works from reserve. Now, the one issue is when you're putting a super large 8-10 pole on your team like this, and especially putting him to the reserve, I think you're getting into the issue, especially in the modern environment, of if he's in reserve as an 8, who do you have up front? Now, there is a couple weird options you could go with. You could go with like a John Carter sort of approach and, try to boost him up and try to play the Barsoom idea. You could play maybe Angry Mob as well. There's a few options you could do to sort of like play this sort of angle. You could even play him in, as I'm sure everybody out there has already thought, an energy deck or an intellect deck. So there are characters you could sort of meld and mash. But, Angry Mob, sorry, which Angry Mob was it that you could actually pair him up with? I can't recall. But one of the Angry Mobs, the Modern Age, I believe, you could actually pair him up with, oof, you'd already be at an 18 and a 16 point character to pair him up with there. So like it would be tough to sort of already create that deck. But Cthulhu, like that one per deck -5 to opponent's character, the bodyguard that flops right in front, that 3. Now, that the minus on the 3 of losing one of the cards in the front line, I mean, the only question that starts to fall for me is, can I now hold a dead character special to use as that discard in that scenario? Uh, I imagine I imagine it probably falls under the discard. Again, we're going to get to the rules episode soon enough, but questions like that already fall for me. But still, even being able to play that 3 in a surprise moment when they're not expecting a chain and just costing you one card, like Cthulhu is just to me the epitome of an amazing reserve character. He brings a lot to the table. Uh, if if you have the points, if you got the points, because right now in modern it is all about the points. And what I'm trying to get at here by almost putting your mind frame into a building from reserve out approach in modern is because those points are hard to come by, and you got to make sure you're making the right decision for what your deck is trying to do and for what your play style is ultimately. And those decisions are going to come down to micro decisions by the time the nationals or regionals pop around, because deck lists will be out, people will already be playing, there's going to be a lot of play test, meta moving, and different decks swinging. So it's going to be very interesting by the time we get to something like the nationals next year, where we're ultimately going to be. Maybe even a new IP comes out. So everything changes. And we're going to discuss that with a few of these reserve characters as well. Second, coming in at a small threat level of 16, Dr. Watson himself. Pretty much relegated to almost like a Baker Street style build, unless you're really just using it for the points. But, with the +2 on the Baker Street build and his actual card from reserve, being really, in my mind, only valuable on a Baker Street build, it falls pretty quickly in that nature. He has a combat forward 6 with a fighting, or sorry, with an intelligence 5. So, there's a little bit of wiggle room there in terms of which way you can move and shake him. I think he will find play early on because of his low point total. That value of 3 points going towards either your tent pole or a home base or something of that ilk is just exponential. And I think that a lot of top tier players might try to use that initially very quickly to an advantage of having a medium range reserve character, but with a couple really big boosts if you're going the Baker Street build style, which I think people might initially in the meta. So again, that point saving, I just don't. You can't beat it. The doctor does not lie when it comes to 16 points. That threat level is real, and 16 points, point shaving at that level with a reserve character with playable cards. Whew, he might be the new doctor in reserve, and we're talking about a new doctor in reserve here. Okay, Strange is out, Watson's in. Okay, that's what I think might be occurring in the new meta, at least early on, with that point saving and people really trying to play these big uber threat level characters on the front line. Third in, I think this one's going to have a lot of play early on too, and it falls in a different nature, and it reminds me very much of Silver Sable of old, and it's Mina Harker. She got on the picture with Cthulhu there as I was bartending and over listening to them wanting to play reserve, and who's a better reserve character. Uh, Argumentatively, it's interesting. I'm not sure, uh, but I will say this: Mina Harker coming in at a threat level of 18. She will be interestingly pretty big in, I think, the meta because she falls more into the energy and brute force aggressive side of like a 6 on each. And what that falls into for me is, a complete different deck style build. It's actually interesting because one of her cards also falls in the range of Baker Street, and energy strength or energy brute force doesn't overly fall towards or lean towards that category. So it'll be an interesting way to see how people use Mina. Now, saving that 1 point again, we keep harping on it as we're discussing the thoughts of a reserve character in modern, and we keep harping on this point, threat level, threat level, threat level, and Mina saving even just a single point back there, but you're getting arguably the best non-one per deck from reserve, which is discard a placed card. What an amazing card that is. And then, of course, getting her additional, Baker Street style card as well, where I believe you have to reveal almost a la the Green Goblin card. You reveal all cards in hand playable by that character. So, of course, again, that Baker Street sort of mentality going forward. I'm sure for a tech build, you could possibly put that in, but you're not usually paying that price unless you're gaining something for it in overpower. So Mina Harker, I think,
really falls in a unique category because I think that discard place card could come really big into play with people who are, placing their early negates like uh, placing that Merlin. That's might be the only negate certain people have in certain deck builds that they're doing right now, or placing that additional one per deck negate that the other character they decided to play, or even if they're playing Merlin, you just discard that negate. I think she's going to pop up early in combo style decks because there's just going to be such a benefit from having that advantage from Mina. Truthfully, I just think her being almost like a flash of new is just but at 18 points, saving you that deck build. Oof. It's just there's something to that, that reveal card. Wow. But we must continue on. Fourth, coming in at a threat level of 19, only in reserve, we got Carson of Venus. Now, it took me a little while to come around to this, but I think Carson of Venus is a true hidden gem, ultimately, uh, of a reserve character. 7 energy and 7 intelligence. Let that settle in for a sec. Now, you're paying 19 points for this reserve, but 19's flat. That's flat price. And for a reserve character that can play 2 cards, and arguably one of his cards is the most premium card that you could possibly have in the game, at least this early modern game of Overpower, in Mimic of the Stars and Garters. And it can be played from reserve. And then it took me a little while as I thought about the second card, and I was like, you could even play that card in a non Baker Street style build. But if you played his second card, which is reveal 3 cards from hand, discard one of them. If you played that in a Baker Street build, you're actually discarding 2 of those cards. And I was like, okay, that's now another premium card coming from Carson in reserve. I was pretty impressed at this point. And the fact that you're getting the dual 7, so you could do so many different things. You could branch out in your 8s, or you could even just, you know, you could really have a mishmash of team with him. But again, having that flat 19 points and being able to sort of spend those additional points in the front line, I think is a really good bonus for Carson. The only issue I think that falls in is, again, 19 points paying like that's premium price now for a reserve. As I just mentioned, there was a 16 and an 18, and as we move on, there's a few other lower ones as well. I think the issue you're going to get into is when you're getting these builds and you're looking for home base threat level points, or you're looking for frontline threat level points, you're going to run into these issues. And I think unless you're building your team with Carson in thought and Carson in mind, it's going to be tough to sort of play these amounts of points. And we're going to get into another one right here as well. The fifth, and that's Morgan Le Fay, coming in at a threat level of 20 points in reserve. At this point now you're spending on your reserve character, much like you were with Cthulhu. Now you gained a lot with Cthulhu in my mind, between the stats and 3 cards you can potentially play from reserve. Now, I think they did right on this threat level count when they made it 20 for her, because her cards are dynamic from reserve. And I think Morgan, the only issue you're going to have in modern play with Morgan Le Fay is, uh, we're right on the same page there, Joshua Christopher, is she's so good up front. Like all her cards are like dynamically good. So it's so hard to say in my mind, I'm going to spend one extra point to put her in reserve when I really could just have her in the front, swapping around with her own other special and, using that point for free. It's it's tough to want to spend that extra point in reserve. Now, I've already come up with thoughts why you would and why you wouldn't. And I think those get into more of like, a discussional sort of deeper thought process to it. But I think, moving forward as, modern is going to continue in the next set and the set after, at the very least of things, 3 sets. I think Morgan Le Fay, as we move forward, will actually become the premier or number one reserve character that will be used. Unless, obviously new sets may bring new crazy characters. But a full negate played defensively from reserve, full negate from reserve in a game where negates are impossible to find. And she gets one and can use it from reserve. Like, amazing. A Hawkeye, you know, knock out all the venture, flip back to reserve character, her or teammate, so it can just be used anywhere. That special to me is in its own would make a character usable from reserve, let alone. Oh, that's hilarious. Sean Home Run Derby. She's the modern battle site. She does it all. She is actually almost a battle site on her own. Phenomenal character, I have to say. She she seems like the best reserve character of ERB. However, the 20 points, like, I have to spend a point on reserve. Like, I get what I'm getting for it, but, it's an energy build at that point, and it's gonna be interesting to see who wants to spend that extra point on her in reserve and not just put her up front. Um, you have the ability not only with her 2 reserve cards, but the thought that you could put in one of those threes, knowing that when she's moving forward into the front line, somebody is clearly, probably dead. Or the character that you flipped to reserve you can actually use one of their specials now with one of her threes. So there are like deeper thoughts you can get into with Morgan Le Fay when it comes to reserve. So I think she's just going to be one of those like top tier. It's going to be expensive. You're going to have to figure it out how to pay for it type of reserve characters. It is just, to me, and like I said, when you move forward in IPs and if like negates are even harder and harder to find, and she just has that from reserve, plus the venture kill swap, oh, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful character altogether. I think she will just be one of the premier reserves as we move forward, for sure. And I mean, again, the 20 points, that's going to be the tough part right now as we're in the modern era. Uh, that's the part where it's going to be expensive. It's going to be hard to get her on the team, but I think people are going to spend that extra point when they start to make these builds. Coming in at 6th, and we're almost done there, folks. Threat level of 16. Ooh, that sounds exciting already. We're this episode has an underlying common denominator of threat level points. And 16. Ooh, I'm liking that. That's a good value in my mind. As John mentioned earlier, and I don't have notes on it, but Billy the Kid, I believe, comes in at 17 in reserve. So, that's good value in my mind. Jane Porter, intellect cheap reserve. However, Her only real playable card from reserve is a lowly 2 intellect card. And you can play it after the opponent concedes, but her already being an intellect forward character to me is just, you know, interesting. I don't know why a 2 intellect after the opponent concedes would be that threatening or daunting. So I don't really see much play for Jane as a reserve. I could see, people using her on the front line for other same reasons as, super cheap frontline character, paying for something else that you're trying to do on the team. But as a reserve character, the two just, I mean, it almost seems like a frivolous joke by whoever made it to a certain degree. Maybe there's some sort of inside joke there. And I get that most of them, when I started looking back at them in the legacy builds, they were sort of on suit attacks from a lot of the characters, but some of them weren't. Like I know the Quicksilver one wasn't. So it's just that one was unique to me. But it's a reserve playable card, so there could be possibilities where you could want that for your mix of Spectrum build in your deck. We'll see if she gets any reserve play. I'm thinking she's going to be probably one of the lowest totem pole reserve characters that get used. We're talking Black Widow in Legacy, even though Void and Energy Attack from reserve seemed like a great card. Uh, it's, that kind of level of card, I think, coming from a very already, in my mind, B minus C character. But I think her cheapness, again, could create some creative builds using her maybe on the front line. But this is not a frontline episode, my friends. Seventh and last, but definitely not least, coming in at a threat level of 20. Victory Harbin. That's a 2-point raise in her regular threat level to her reserve threat level. She's 18 on the front line. Reserve, 20. We were just talking about these points. Having her potentially be up front where then you could push her to the back might be an interesting build, as we just talked about. I could see you playing something along the lines of like a Victory Harbin, Morgan Le Fay frontline, another third character with, a Carson in reserve. That'd be interesting. You could flip flop away. You could do crazy things there. Just giving away random thoughts that are coming up right now. Now, Victory Harbin was probably one of the more unique reserve characters to me, and I saved her for last for a reason. She really plays unique cards. And then I was like, the first two cards to me was sort of weird because I was like, okay, if she's in reserve, her draw card, you're really paying, 3 cards to get 4. Sure, you get to keep duplicates. And then you get to pay 2 cards for 7 energy attack. And then I was like, well, oh, wait a minute. Then you get to avoid an intellect attack. Or an intellect icon, I believe it's actually. And draw a 1-4. Now I was like, wow, that fuels her other cards. And it obviously fuels other things like, if you're starting to already now build combo decks in your mind, it fuels the Moriarty special as well. And, what a great thing that you could be avoiding getting this other, if it's an intellect icon, you avoid it with hers, you draw, and then obviously you get the low intellect card and then you can use it on the next avoid. Like there's just so many things you could ultimately do with her. Plus, drawing four is not to be slept on in this game, especially if you're using her up front. That is a pretty big card in this game. I just think you might find a better build at 18 point or 18 threat level than 20 threat level. That's where, to me, the discrepancy ultimately comes into play. You're paying a little bit for her, but again, three cards that ultimately can be used from reserve is not to be slept on. A lot of these characters we're speaking about tonight, they really only have that one or two card access from reserve, and some of them just are like medium to garbage at best, unless you're building around certain home bases or uh, things like that. So I think you have to sort of like if the meta somehow shifted maybe to like intellect completely, you could see someone like Victory Harbin really coming into play because, if you're getting a lot of intellect attacks thrown at you, she's the greatest reserve character ever, avoid drawing all day. But I think that's where it's going to be interesting, these early metas that form and what metas form in different areas, like what meta forms in Ohio or in Atlanta or, in Texas or whatever another hotspot may be, Seattle or even here in Canada. Like there are going to be different metas to sort of start with. So it's going to be very interesting, when we all mishmash in these first few modern tournaments, especially ones for, $20,000 prize pools, it's going to be very, very interesting to see who's got the right meta at the right time. Because there's not going to be many, many modern tournaments before these big regionals start to occur. And you might only get to make it to one, if none. Some people will be lucky and make it to two, three, even four. It'll be interesting to see if you go these sort of routes of intellect or, combat or brute force or energy, and then who's catering against it. I think that's where, especially after the first modern regional, I think that's where all of a sudden these deeper second level thoughts will start to occur because people will start to have seen these other decks. And I don't know if at that point they're going to be online or, forced to be shown. But I think, people will get the gist of a lot of what's going on. And then they'll start building around it and start building better ideas and, just get deeper and deeper. By the time you get to the second tournament, it'll probably be less of a dynamic field of crazy decks, but more of, you know, starting to settle into like two or three or four or five, six thought ideas, and those are starting to get focused. And then by the time the nationals roll around, you might only be down to three ideas, and but then hopefully at that point somebody takes the time and comes up with the meta breaker or the new card, and Victor Harbin might end up being one of those secret hidden meta breaker kind of characters, especially if things start to lean heavy intellect early on. I can't really see that happening with that event creeping out there. Well, the last thought would be someone who fits your stat or threat level left with one big special. As I talked about, the thought of Thing with his 10 in Legacy. You could even switch that around and play something like even, Angry Mob with their multi 7 can't play specials coming up from reserve just because you want the 16 points or it works well with your build, or even potentially playing something like the Angry Mob Modern and playing them as your reserve 8 and playing a big boy brute force character up front. These are thoughts you could really play with as well as you approach modern. Now, a lot of this comes down to points: threat level, threat level, threat level. Now, I noticed as we've gone through, there's a lot of things that I may have already missed. I believe Mage's Musings, talked about Tarzan having abilities from reserve, and John already pointed out that I didn't talk about Billy the Kid. Clearly, no love for combat from this guy. Uh, but it's going to be interesting as we move forward what you're willing to spend on your reserve character. And I think as I, wrap this in a full circle, you have to intricately build your reserve into your new modern deck and not just say I want, you know, 20-point character here, 21-point character here, a 19 there, and now I'm stuck with that 16 in reserve that I just have to use one of these two characters. I think the more dynamic, interesting decks that are going to move forward are the ones that use the reserve in a manner that isn't just stat driven. But I could be wrong. We will, as I aforementioned, see when it comes to these regionals moving forward. So, what I'd love if you all end up watching this video again or see it up on YouTube is just write in the comments, your thoughts on how you're looking at the reserve character moving forward in modern play. So, I love reading all of your comments on the videos. So it'll be super interesting to see how people approach it and, understanding that inherent abilities work in reserve. So you could potentially be, throwing Dracula's offer out when he's in reserve. Like I know it's a weird thought, but you have to keep all of these thoughts in your frame of mind, right? Not only as Joshua is bringing up there, uh, does having reserve characters with abilities and so on create more actions, but it creates more like placement slots. It creates more, there's just so much you gain from having a character in reserve, and especially if you choose home bases that aren't like the round table, and you actually get to place an additional special. Like, think of what I just mentioned, having Cthulhu in reserve, and you get to play all these specials from reserve. But not only that, you place the biggest special in the ERB set, an 11. Like, it'd be as if you could play like Magneto in reserve and Legacy, get to place those 11, but he gets to play his multi for his avoid and his target character may not attack, all from reserve as well. Like premium level stuff, and also be an 8/7 character, and throw intellects attacks from reserve. Like, this is where spending what I would say 3 extra points might be worth it. That's a big, big, big monster coming from reserve, and you could have not only what I'm mentioning, that stat backup, but you could also have this big 11 attack, a la the thing mentioning I've been doing all podcast. So I'd love to hear all your comments in the comments section after the video is posted. I really enjoy reading it, and I know other people who watch the videos really enjoy looking at those comments as well. So please leave all your comments, obviously, here as well. And I know people read through as they're watching, but please do leave them as well in the comment section. This has already been a bit of a long show tonight already. However, what I mentioned earlier is about to happen. And, I contacted this Robin Hood character, and, I got the lowdown on OPedia. So once I figured out how to get it all on my phone, I have to admit, it actually was a bit of a game changer for me. Uh, this Opedia, I'm going to call it an app. Again, everything I call an app, but it works on my phone. So to me, that's a, app-based sort of idea. It was a game changer. This Mr. Hood character, uh, he's trying to get several people on board to beta test it and to sort of, I think, basically do what the other boys of LRG were doing and sort of look for these bugs or like wrong card titles, anything along those lines. But I did see most of it's all correct already, the way I was looking at it. So he's looking for some beta testers. What I loved about this Opedia app was it worked completely offline. And, a lot of the time when I'm working on things, especially like the deck builder, it's all online and it's all depends on like where my Wi-Fi's at or my, where I'm streaming or, how my phone's connected. I, I pay for good service. I should get good service, but you all know how phones just generally work. Sometimes things slow down. So the thing I really loved about Opedia for me, especially, when I'm late night or whatever, and I just sort of like clicking through a million ideas a second, was that it was completely offline and that it it was phenomenal in terms of the speed aspect because of that. Now, when you are online with it, it's really neat because it essentially has additional features. Now, I'm not going to sort of beat around the bush anymore. Basically, Opedia is a card database that is text based and it shows you all of the old legacy cards as well as all of the modern cards that are out, the ERB set, and so on that will eventually come out. What I liked about having this was when I started having all these legacy thoughts, I was able to sort of flex from back into legacy mode and look at legacy characters without having to go to the website we all used to go to. And also then flexing back into modern characters really quickly as well. It's all modern, or sorry, it's all text based. However, when you have or are on the online, when you're logged into Wi-Fi, the cool feature that it has is with the modern cards, if you click the title of the card, it actually will click you right into Cardio and show you the visual as well. Not only is all this there, but they built a memorization tool to memorize the cards. Now, what do I mean by that is and they set up a few shortcuts so you can do all of the ERB characters or you can do individual ones as well. And it's a memorization tool that came out and you essentially tell your phone how many times you want to hear it, which character you want to hear, or all of the ERB characters, and it'll just play it back in your headphone. And so it'll just literally go through all the ERB characters, all of their stats, their threat levels, all of their specials, and it'll just play it. So, like, there was one night I was literally just falling asleep and I was like, oh, I just want to hear all the characters. Like, that's how insanely, into this game I am. And I'm just laying there and I have my headphones in and I just played the ERB and it's literally like, Leonidas, 1, 8, 3, 5, whatever his stats are. I don't know them off the top of my head just yet. Threat level 21. And then it'll basically say all of his specials. So it was really, really good in terms of like trying to get that memorization down. And so I already really enjoyed it for that aspect. I mean, for me, I build my decks in my head when I finally get the card catalog up there. And this is helping because I can quickly flip from character to character as my mind's moving as fast as my finger. I'm already there seeing the information I want. So it really has been helping me as I'm transitioning into new modern overpower, but also with the idea of, I'm still going to be playing Legacy. I still am going to be in the NAOL. I'm still going to be, competitive in that world. So I'm really intrigued on the idea that I can flex between both and look at all the cards, whoever I want, whenever I want. It had really, really great hashtag features. And again, this is all going to be shown very shortly. The one thing I have to say I really enjoyed that I believe they're going to be putting up videos soon about what their app can do. But the one thing I saw that they just showed me was they paired it up with Quizlet, which is like a cue card um, app, question and answer sort of like game app that's out there. And you can actually push all of the overpower information into it and create your own little overpower flashcards and overpower games on your phone that you could just ultimately be playing on this Quizlet. So it was really, really quite interesting. I have to admit it sort of elevated my thought and process towards it. Um, I will say I pushed them very hard because, I didn't really like that they were trying to push only Mac users, only Mac users, only Mac users. So I actually pushed them to open it up, and as long as you have an internet connection, and I'm unsure if you can do it through phone, but as long as you have an internet connection, they will accept you or a select few in the beta testing as well. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can also be included in this as well. So the way I decided to do this is immediately right following this podcast. I have already pre-recorded a demo. It's crudely done. It's, a phone recording a phone and me just going through things. But it's just a quick demo to show you the speed and the efficiency of what you can ultimately do. Right now it's private on my account, but immediately following this podcast, which is ending in a few minutes, I will post it live. Now, when I post it live, it's a quick demo of it, and ultimately at the end of it, there is how you proceed through. Obviously, watch it whenever you want. You can just see the demo to see what it's all about, but then you can also, be a part of this. And I'm gaining these tools and it's helping me, so I want all of you to basically gain these tools and get to the top of the mountain as well. I find using this in conjunction with cardio has just like blown up my mind process in terms of what I'm ultimately doing. So that's the way we're going to do it tonight. I just let you see that sort of quick demo immediately afterwards. And again, it's just about, I think it's about 10 minutes long. So you'll get to see it and sort of see what you think about it. And ultimately, at the end, it shows you how to get it if you want it. And I'm not sure how many people they're taking, but I think they want everybody to have this. Robin Hood takes from the rich and gives to the poor, and that's why I teamed up with this person. And I think I just actually think it's a great utility. So check out the demo; it'll be up within minutes, live on the Overpower Mountain podcast channel. So, with that being said, thanks for joining me. This is the Overpower Mountain podcast, and I am your host, the OP Goat. So keep thinking overpower, deck building, and getting to the top of the mountain. It has been a great episode talking reserve with you. I look forward to seeing you every week. I'm going to say this, check out the demo of OPedia immediately after this and sign up for it. You'll really enjoy. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.